Speaking to us today, we have Edward Goodwin from the School of Law to talk to us about the school's vibrant and active social life and award-winning student-run societies that provide personal and academic opportunities. Welcome, Edward. Thank you for coming. So, first of all, very important question. Why is law so important?
I think because ultimately, when you're in a society, many people all living together, all with our own sorts of aims, the only way we can all live in a close sort of society together is that there are some rules that at least govern the way we interact with each other. And so law's always been hugely important since we all came together in that way. So, if you think in very early times, when we were just starting to farm, people who owned the land would give access to someone like me, and I needed to make sure that if I was sowing my seeds in the springtime, that by the time the harvest came, I was still entitled to be able to go in there and take the food in that I had grown for myself, because it was very much about existing and subsisting at that point. So law's always been really, really important for societies just to be able to function. And obviously, we still see law impinging on our lives even today. If we think about things that have just been in the news, quite often law is involved in that. So many people might have seen cases that have gone through the courts in relation to challenging the previous government's Rwanda plans, for instance, or people's human rights, and in terms of being able to seek refugee status. There's currently debates going on about whether we should change rules around renting property, so that if you're renting a residential property, is the landlord entitled to just give you short notice to get out of that property, which is something that students experience throughout their degrees. Not the being thrown out, but just that they generally are renting somewhere. And so something like the law around leases, they realise how important it is for their life. And you can have these debates about, should landlords be able to do this, whilst law is in there trying to balance up the interests of the tenants and to protect them. But we also have to realise that changing a law in that way might have other effects on people like landlords being willing to rent houses to people. And at what cost? If they feel more at risk that they can't get rid of tenants, will they put up the rents for all of us? So law is really important for a society in trying to find the sort of optimal balance between everybody's interests and what everybody wants out of life. And so that's challenging, but it also makes it really fascinating to actually think about things like that. How should we set the law correctly to balance those interests? So I think it's just an inherent part of everyday life. And sometimes we're very aware of it happening to us, and at other times it's just happening in the background for us. So yes, law's just a fundamental part of the way we live, I think.
And just there, you've listed so many different aspects of the law and how it affects our everyday lives. Mm-hmm. If a student who comes to this university wants to study law, is there a way that they can focus on parts of legislation that they're really interested in?
So yes, there is. One of the reasons that people like to do law degrees is because they give you access into the legal professions. And so something like, if you wanted currently to go into the bar, you have to take a law degree in order to qualify to do that. If you haven't done a law degree, then you'd have to do a conversion course later. And the same goes for students that are maybe looking to go back to international jurisdictions, someone like Singapore. You have to take a recognised law degree. Now, as part of that, there will be some subjects you have to do, and they will be compulsory. So generally that might involve a course looking at criminal law in some form. It might be looking at property, land, and the law around that. And those will be compulsory subjects that all students would need to do in order to make sure that their law degree counts for professional purposes. But outside of that, there's plenty of scope for students just to select particular areas of law that they're very interested in. So I think it works out, you know, it might be roughly the equivalent of a year or a year and a bit of your degree, where you're taking options rather than core subjects, as we'd say, the compulsory subjects. And then students really can focus, particularly in our law school. The sort of range of choices is fantastic for the students, whether they're interested in things to do with human rights, whether they're interested in more commercial areas, whether they're interested in international law. There's so many different sort of modules and options they can do. Yes, you can tailor it to whatever is interesting you at the time, but ultimately it's the skills you're learning as well from those modules that you would end up taking into any area of law that you might ultimately go and practice or choose to work within.
And you said there about going into the industry. So if you study a law degree at Nottingham, how do you help the students who are doing that get industry help, meet professionals and get, real world experience?
Okay, so there's obviously the careers service that the university offers, and within the careers service there will be people who have specialist knowledge of the legal professions, and students can go and speak to those individuals who may help them to understand the difference between being, say, a solicitor rather than a barrister. They might help them to even narrow down which area of law they could be interested in. And then they would let them know about the work experience opportunities that are coming up that they could apply for. So there's always the careers support. In association with that, there are a number of events which actually the student societies put on. So one of the advantages of the law school and its really good reputation for, the sort of quality of law students that we're producing is that a number of the firms of solicitors, particularly in London, say the commercial law firms, they're really keen to meet our students. And so through societies like the Law Society, there will be drinks events, presentation events, sort of dinners that are arranged to go and meet people from the graduate recruitment departments, to meet the trainees, to make those contacts and to get some insights. The Bar Society will be organising events that help you to access the bar and to meet barristers from different chambers. Sometimes we're contacted by chambers, commercial chambers, to help them find students that would appreciate a day's work experience in an area of law that maybe students from particular backgrounds wouldn't necessarily be considering, like the commercial bar. And a lot of this flows from the reputation of the law school. So in that sense, yes, the students are well connected, a lot through these student law societies, in all fairness. And we as a law school think it's actually a really good approach for making those contacts, because yes, we could be in the middle sort of talking to the graduate recruitment people, but why not let the students learn how to communicate, interact, organise events in a professional way with the firms, so that they themselves are then learning those skills that they're going to need when they're going into practice, and they'll then be working with clients in that way. So we support the law societies if they come to us and ask for any advice or for us to go to events, then we as members of staff do that. But otherwise, we just think it's a really good experience for them to organise a lot of these things. So yeah, there's lots of events, but otherwise, it's very much the norm that students during their holiday periods are making applications to go and do work experience with barristers or to go and do work experience with solicitors' firms. So a lot of it within law as a degree is that the students show the initiative to apply for these positions themselves. But within the term time, there's plenty of events that are going on. There's careers events, you know, career fair, which is a special law career fair to meet people. So yeah, there's lots of good opportunities to meet the professions. And as I say, it's just really good that our students are in demand amongst the commercial law firms. Our students are in demand if they want to go into family law, if they want to go into criminal law, whichever area of law they want to go to. Having this Nottingham degree really does help to keep doors open for them to be able to go to whichever particular specialism they want.
And as you said at the start, the landscape of law is constantly changing. So how does that affect students on a day-to-day basis when it comes to, you know, new research and new legal practices coming in?
Okay, I think number one, students coming to Nottingham Law School will as a rule be being lectured or have tutorials or seminars with people who are very active researchers, so both teaching and research. And as researchers, we have to stay up to date with these developments that you mention. And I think what we then try to do is we try to blend it in where we can into the teaching so that students realise the law isn't static. These are things they might have read about in the newspaper, and if we as experts in that can then help to sort of give the legal dimension to something they've maybe seen in the news, then that obviously makes life interesting for them, makes them realise the law degree is relevant, and it's good for us. We can test out. Oftentimes in seminars, if I've seen something new or got new ideas, I like to test them out with the students in the room. And it's amazing how much I get back from the students, their own good ideas that test some of these research ideas that I've been having. So to an extent, yes, being active researchers, we will be keeping abreast of these developments. And then where we can, we'll be discussing it with the students so that, you know, if they're going into interviews, maybe for jobs, they're equally up to date with what's happening. We've seen that, actually thinking about it, we've seen that very recently with technological developments. So one of the big challenges for the law at the moment is the development of artificial intelligence, developments in, you know, all the huge amounts of data that are being stored about us through going through the internet. And these are legal challenges that we've really only been thinking about, I don't know, certainly, you know, in the last decade. And we as a law school have seen that as a new emerging area of law. We've recruited researchers that have been looking at this. They've now joined the law school, and we've been able, because of the number of people we've recruited, to be able to put that on as an undergraduate, you know, in undergraduate courses, we've been able to build it in. So yeah, being active researchers helps us to, I think, give interesting and relevant teaching to the students, but also hopefully to then offer them full modules in some of these areas as they emerge.
Thank you very much for that, Edward. Lots of information there, but if you have any questions about law at Nottingham, send them in on the QR code now or visit the website for more information.